Hey everyone, what's going on? It's your good buddy Sam, and it's time for another exciting Maximus P tutorial. I hope things are going well for you in your life, however you have arranged the things in your life. Things are going pretty okay for me here in the new year, except for this dude outside honking his horn. To sum up, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me no more. Something I think an important lesson to keep in mind here is that there is no jit dot regret. See, no such object. There is no jit dot sorrow. There is no jit dot past, not an object. There is only jit dot plur. Peace, love, unity, rave. And that's the attitude that I'm going to take towards this whole episode and forge ahead into a bold new world of Max and sound and excitement. So let's make a new project together here, you and I, viewer, and let's go to File, New Project, and make a project, and we're going to call it FFT Rain. This is a cool effect that I've been playing around with since maybe last summer. And it uses the FFT and PFFT, so it's cool that way. And we're going to make a project rather than a patch because there's two components, the master patch and the PFFT. And if we put them both in one project, both these patchers, they'll be able to find each other for sure. So make a new project, FFT Rain, get a little project window, and I'm going to make plus add new file, one called master, here it is, and one called PFFT Rain. Cool. And then what we want to do in master is make a PFFT tilde. Give it first the name of the subpatch you want to find, PFFT rain, the one we just made, and the FFT size. And usually this doesn't matter, but as you'll see, well, it doesn't not matter, but usually it's something, or it is sometimes something you don't think too much about, but it's going to be important in this patch. So let's put it in number 1024. We'll use an FFT window size of 1024. And then if you did everything right, if you double click on this guy, it should pop up a patch that says PFFT rain, which is referencing this PFFT rain file. But you'll notice in the bottom left corner here, it has modify read-only rather than a little lock because this is a read-only instance of this patch. Anyway, so let's go to this PFFT rain thing now. And what we're going to be doing, basically, to give you an idea of the overall picture, is rather than taking the FFT of a sound and affecting it in some way, we're going to be working with the amplitude and phase directly by writing those amplitude sounds, the amplitude values to a buffer, and then reading them back to reconstruct the FFT. So in this PFFT rain file, please be so kind as to make the following objects. FFT in tilde 1. This is going to be, we don't actually, as you know, this is where the FFT would come in. We're not actually going to use this sound. We're just going to use this final value, the bin index. FFT out tilde 1. This is where the sound comes out, obviously. In 2. This will give us a non-signal input. So we'll have an inlet that's just, we can pass max messages through it. And finally, well, almost finally, an index tilde object. Give it the buffer name, please set me. This doesn't actually matter. We're going to set it again in a second. Just hook that up like so. And then finally, we need a pole to car tilde object for converting polar to Cartesian values, and connect the left output, or the output of this index, to the left inlet of this poltocar. So we're going to be reading amplitude values from a buffer. And for the phase values, we actually have to send something to poltocar or it won't output correctly. So make a sig tilde 0. This will just be the signal 0, so the phase will always be 0. And then connect the poltocar outputs to the FFT out 1. And that's it. That's the subpatcher. So now back in the main patcher, this object we will need to delete and then undo delete to refresh, to draw a fresh version of this patch that now you can see has 2 inlets and 1 outlet, as we would expect. And now we need a buffer. So let's make a buffer. Let's call it rain cloud. Give it a good West Coast surname. or family name. I get really confused about surname, family name, first name, proper name, prename, as you might say in French if you were one of those people. Sorry, this is off topic. So buffer rank cloud. Okay, now an important thing. This buffer is not holding sound, it's holding FFT values. So we're not actually concerned about the length of this buffer in seconds, we're concerned about the length of this buffer in samples. So use this @samps attribute and give it a number of samples 512. And the reason it's going to be 512 is because the number of amplitude values that we can set is going to be equal to half of the size of the FFT window. The reason why involves math that, to be honest, I wish I understood better. So maybe we'll talk about that in another video when I can be bothered to actually understand what's going on. So anyway, this buffer is going to hold sample values. Let's make a waveform tilde object at buff name rain cloud. So this will reference the contents of this buffer. And you can see it's a little over 7, maybe like 9 milliseconds long, which is about 512 samples. And okay, so that's basically that. The last thing we need is a load mess rain cloud going into a message box set $1, and this is just going to make sure that the buffer in our PFFT references this buffer here, or the index rather references this buffer here. So if you double click on this load mess, and I'm also going to connect a bang just so we can bang this explicitly, that will send this rain cloud message into this PFFT object. And now if you double click on this PFFT to see the instance, the index tilde still says please set me, but if you double click on it, you'll see it makes this window rain cloud, referencing the rain cloud buffer. So we've set that successfully. All right. Finally, let's make a live.gain and an easy DAC so that we can hear the output of this whole thing. And let me just make sure that my audio output is not going to be, okay, it should be okay. Let's just connect the PFFT to the gain and connect the left and right channels of this gain here and turn it down a little bit just to start off. Okay, so what I want to do now is write to this buffer individual samples so that we can hear what happens when we turn on basically just one bin in the FFT. So we can do that using a poke tilde object, give it the name rain cloud. This will let us write a sample to the buffer where the left input is the sample value to write and the middle input is the sample index. So if, for example, we send this the message 110, this will write, I think it needs to go through an unpack. This will write the sample value of 1 to the 10th bin in this rain cloud object. And there it is. Look, it's written the value successfully. Isn't that exciting? Now, for some reason, this PFFT isn't making any sound. Why is that? This all looks totally... Oh, because I forgot a very important thing. So great, let's go back. We want this index to read through the samples in the buffer. So to do that, we would normally use a count tilde object, which counts up continuously from 0 to some value. Instead, we can use the rightmost output of this FFT in, which is the bin index. So it's a signal vector where the value is not sound. It's not between -1 and 1 like a sound vector would be. Instead, it's just the bin index. It's which FFT value we happen to be processing at that particular instant in time. So if we connect that up to index, now this index object is going to be outputting the particular sample value at each position in this buffer. So let's save this, and then we need to delete this PFFT object, recreate it, and then finally push this again to load the correct buffer. And look at that, now it's actually making sound, although it's quite low. So let's maybe write the 100th. Listen to that beautiful sound. You can maybe hear it a little tiny. Let's times tilde 5, just so we can hear these sounds. Yeah, listen to that. Isn't that just beautiful? Two beautiful, pure sine tones singing out into the world their own particular Sounds like the left channel is much louder than the right. Maybe it's just my shitty headphones. Okay, so that's cool. But we don't want these samples hanging around forever and always. So what I'm going to do is use this cool trick that you might not know about, which is that you can actually apply. The buffer takes this message called apply that lets you actually apply a function to every sample in the buffer. And one useful one is gain. If you send the apply gain, if you send the buffer the message apply gain, say 0.5, it makes every sample in the buffer half as loud. So if we listen to these samples and keep pressing this, we can essentially fade out all the samples in the buffer. So that's pretty sweet. Let's automate that. Let's make, let's push NF to make a floating point holder register. Give it the argument 0.9. Make a metro object with an argument like 50. That's pretty quick. And then now we can apply an automatic gain to all the samples in the buffer. And get this continual ringing effect. Especially if we hook up another metronome to continually add, poke new samples into this buffer. So that's pretty sweet. Kind of, you know, we have this automatic, annoying, vibrating noisemaker. Maybe instead of writing to just one particular bin index, we could write to sort of a random range. Why don't we do that? So let's make a random object so this metro can pull random values rather than just a particular bin index. And let's make an R slider so that we can pick a range of values that we'd like to select randomly. And because there are 512 bins in this buffer, let's open up the inspector for the R slider and scroll down to size and set the range to be 256. Or, sorry, no, 512. What am I saying? 256. Cool. So now let's make an exclamation minus object. This is the same as the regular minus object, except instead of subtracting the left from the right, it subtracts the right from the left. And that's useful because it lets us hook the R slider up like this. And now the number that comes out of here is just going to be the difference between this. It's the size of this window, essentially. It's the difference between the high value and the low value. And we can pop that into random. And then we need to offset that random value by the low value here. And I'll make this a little bigger so it's slightly easier to see, hopefully, what's going on. But now if I turn on this metronome, oh, sorry, this can't be 100 anymore. It needs to be $1. And now, if I turn on this metronome, you can see it writing to all these different values in that range. And we can scroll down here and get this lovely harmonic. The closer you are to the lower end of this frequency of the FFT, the more harmonic the bins are. Isn't that lovely? Not the more harmonic the bins are, that's not strictly speaking true, but anyway, the more it's going to sound like a lovely harmony. As you get up, it's going to be buzzier and more horrible. Maybe you like that, I don't know. The values up here are either much higher than my speakers can reproduce, or why can't I hear these? Anyway, lots of interesting values down here to play around with. So when you play around with this in your own time, things to mess around with are the speed of these two metronomes, the amount of gain that you apply here, and the size of the FFT as well. You'll have to change the size of the buffer and of this R slider if you change the size of this FFT, but it can be pretty interesting. One last addition that we can make is in here. Instead of sending 0 to the phase, we can add a little bit of noise that can make the output here a little bit less siny and a little bit less buzzy. So to do that, come into PFFT rain here again, and with this FFT in object, add the argument no FFT. What no FFT does, the second argument here to FFT in usually applies a window to each FFT frame, which is, or FFT, yeah, frame. And that's to, changing that window can affect the FFT in various ways. But this special argument no FFT actually passes through the original signal here without taking the FFT. And that's cool because now if I slide the leftmost output of that into the poltocar here, it lets us adjust the phase of each of these, of the FFT output here, by adding a little bit of noise. So now if I come back into this patch and make a noise object, and then like times tilde, and then let's make a freaking slider. And, oh god, what have I done? Make a slider and give it floating point output and a range of 1. This ought to let us add a little bit of noise. So let's turn this back on. Need to hit this again. You can hear there, maybe. I'm going to turn down this noise. Here it gets real pure, adding back more noise. Makes it a little bit smoother. To be honest, it's not as dramatic as I expected, but anyway, it's a fun effect. Cool. So that's the very basic FFT rain type sound that I've been playing around with. It's pretty, if you go a little deeper into it and mess around a bit, you can make some pretty interesting stuff happen. So hopefully that was an interesting look at another creative way to use PFFT. And thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon. Take it easy, guys.